He signed the contract at 6 a.m., a cold pen in his palm, expecting only a transaction, a child without complications. But when she walked into his boardroom carrying nothing but a single leather satchel and a lifetime of hope in her eyes, everything changed. What started as a business arrangement was about to challenge the richest man in the world in ways no amount of money ever could. Before we start the story, leave a comment to let us know which city you're watching from. Like and subscribe to support our community. Your support means a lot to us. Now, enjoy the story as we continue. The first time Victor Langford laid eyes on the agreement, the lab coat and harsh fluorescent lights of the fertility clinic made the entire process feel clinical, detached. He was used to spreadsheets, profit margins, and quarterly forecasts. He understood numbers. He understood power. But a contract promising a child? That was territory he'd never cared to explore. At 52, Victor had everything: a skyscraper empire, luxury estates on 5 continents, and a reputation for keeping his emotions locked behind walls stronger than any vault. His wealth was unassailable, but when his doctor told him that his only shot at a legacy required a surrogate, Victor bristled. He would have children the old-fashioned way, except fate had other plans. He arrived at the clinic precisely at 5:45 a.m., as instructed. The corridor was silent, save for the distant hum of generators and the occasional beep of medical monitors. A nurse led him to a small conference room where a delicate stack of papers awaited his signature. He fidgeted with his cufflinks, titanium and onyx, gifts from his mother who had died 7 years ago, thinking how even that memory felt distant. The door opened, and in walked Camille Bishop. She carried a leather satchel that looked worn, its edges softened by use and care. She was 26, with wide, soulful eyes and hair the color of burnt sienna, tied back in a simple braid. Her white blouse and jeans were modest, but on her face was an intensity Victor had only ever seen in charitable appeals and political speeches. "Mr. Langford?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor nodded. He gestured toward the chair opposite him. She sat down carefully, as if the weight of the moment pressed on her shoulders. They exchanged polite hellos, but the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Camille slid the satchel to Victor's side of the table, her hands trembling for a fraction of a second before steadying. "I know what you want," she said, her gaze firm. "And I know why you won't look me in the eye right now. But I need you to understand what this means to me." Victor looked up. He met her eyes for a moment, surprise flickering behind his usual reserve. In those soft brown depths, he saw a mixture of hope and fear, hope for the child she'd carry, fear of a future she couldn't predict. "I don't usually do this," he said, glancing at the contract. "I'm more accustomed to hiring CEOs, not surrogates." Camille offered a small, rueful smile. "I'm not just a name on a page. I'm a person." Victor frowned. He signed his name with a precise flourish, then sat back. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's do this." Camille exhaled, and for a moment, relief softened her features before it was replaced by steely determination. "Thank you." He handed back the pen and watched as she tucked it into her satchel. Then he stood, gathering his suit jacket. He expected their interaction would end there. A simple business exchange, followed by routine checkups and, 9 months later, a child. He would pay her, well, handsomely, and walk away with what he believed was best, a legacy without attachments. But as Camille rose, she hesitated. "Before I go," she said, her tone earnest, "know that I'll treat your child like my own. And I hope you'll do him justice." Victor paused in the doorway, pen still in hand. He stared at her profile, the gentle slope of her cheek, the earnest set of her mouth. She carried more than a contract in that satchel. She carried a piece of her future, her dreams. He closed the door softly behind him, but the moment remained unlocked in his mind. He walked down the hall, but his thoughts stayed with Camille's words. "He'll treat your child like his own." As he stepped into the early morning light outside, he realized that in paying for a baby, he'd just signed up for something far more unpredictable, the possibility of caring. It was exactly 1 week after Camille and Victor signed the contract, and the anticipation hung in the sterile hallways of the fertility clinic like a whispered prayer. Camille arrived early, 5:30 a.m., as usual, with her leather satchel slung across her shoulder. She took a steadying breath before stepping inside, willing herself to appear calm. But beneath that composed exterior, her heart fluttered as if it were a hummingbird trapped in her chest. Victor waited for her in the small consultation room where they first met. When Camille opened the door, she found him seated, reviewing medical notes on a tablet. His tailored suit jacket lay draped over the back of his chair, a reminder of the world outside this tiny room. She felt the familiar tug of nerves but forced a smile. "Good morning," he said without looking up. His voice was measured, polite, but Camille detected a softness she hadn't noticed before. "Morning," she replied, closing the door behind her. She set her satchel on the table and sat across from him. The fluorescent lights above buzzed quietly. Dr. Alvarez, their specialist, breezed in moments later. With him came two nurses, each carrying a clipboard. After brief greetings, the doctor clicked on a presentation slide showing Camille's medical file. "Everything looks good," Dr. Alvarez said. "Your health checks are in the normal range. Blood pressure, hormone levels, uterine health, all are optimal. We can proceed with the embryo transfer as soon as we obtain the sample." He turned to Victor. "Mr. Langford, once the sample arrives, we'll schedule the transfer." Victor looked between the doctor and Camille. He cleared his throat. "How soon?" "Couple of weeks at most. We need to coordinate timing with Camille's cycle." Dr. Alvarez unlocked his tablet, showing a calendar. "If all goes smoothly, implantation could be scheduled by the end of the month." A hush fell. Though the conversation was clinical, for Camille, each word pulsed with hope. For Victor, each sentence represented a step closer to the legacy he'd long believed he needed. But today was different. Today, he realized that with every test and every appointment, he was more present than he'd ever planned. After the doctor left, a nurse handed Camille a glass of water. "Take these supplements twice daily," she instructed, pointing to a chart. Camille nodded. She tucked the chart into her satchel and stood. Victor rose, holding the door as she passed. "I'll arrange your travel and lodging," he said. "I want this to be as comfortable as possible." Camille glanced at him, surprised at his concern. "Thank you, Mr. Langford." He paused, then softened. "Call me Victor." She smiled, the nerves easing slightly. "Victor," she repeated. As they left the clinic, the cool morning air greeted them. They walked in silence to the valet pickup, each lost in thought. Victor watched Camille's profile, the way the sun caught her braid, how she held herself with quiet determination, and felt an unfamiliar tug at his chest. Now that they were sharing more than papers, Victor wondered if he was falling into something deeper. He chastised himself, this was business. But when he saw the vulnerability in Camille's eyes as she paused to breathe in the morning light, he couldn't help but care. Over the next fortnight, Victor ensured Camille's every need was met. He arranged a cozy cottage near the clinic, hired a nutritionist, and even sent a driver to pick her up for appointments. Always, he remained behind the scenes, preferring to focus on logistics rather than emotions. Yet each text he sent, "Let me know if you need anything," was a small strand tying him to her fate. Camille appreciated his generosity but bristled at the transactional nature of their relationship. She longed for an acknowledgement of her feelings, the scared teenager she once was, hoping for a baby, the woman she had become, determined to give life. She penned a note one night and slipped it into her satchel, a simple message thanking him, not for the money, but for his kindness. The night before the scheduled transfer, Camille lay awake in the quiet cottage. The moonlight filtered through lace curtains, casting soft patterns on the walls. She clutched the note in her hand, uncertain if she'd give it to Victor or not. Meanwhile, half a world away in his penthouse, Victor stared at her file on his desk. He tapped the note he'd imagined she might write, words of gratitude, perhaps even friendship. He realized that money couldn't buy the peace he felt, nor the concern that kept him awake. Tomorrow, their lives would change. But in this moment, Just before dawn, they stood at the precipice of something neither had anticipated, a bond forged not by contracts or currency, but by the fragile thread of shared hope. The morning of the embryo transfer dawned clear and bright, as if the sky itself wished to bless what lay ahead. Camille arrived at the clinic with her heart pounding so loud she was sure the nurses could hear it. She wore a light dress that fluttered around her knees and brought her hair down from its usual braid. Today felt different. Today her dream moved from idea to reality. Victor was waiting for her outside the procedure room, looking more tense than she had ever seen him. His dark suit seemed heavy in the gentle morning light, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. When Camille caught his eye, she offered her softest smile. Inside, she was terrified, but his presence gave her strength. "Ready?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Camille nodded. "As I'll ever be." A nurse led Camille inside and helped her onto the procedure table. The room was quiet except for the soft whir of a nearby machine. Victor stood near the window, his back to Camille, as the doctor and nurses prepared the transfer. Camille closed her eyes as the doctor explained each step. She felt a brief pinch when the catheter entered, then a gentle pressure as the embryo was placed. The whole process lasted less than 10 minutes, but to Camille, it stretched like an eternity. She held her breath until the doctor nodded. "All done," Dr. Alvarez said. "Now we wait for the blood test in 2 weeks." Camille exhaled, relief flooding her body. She sank into the pillow, tears of joy and fear mixing on her cheeks. Victor stepped forward and took her hand. "You did it," he said softly. She offered him a shaky laugh. "I couldn't have done it without you." He squeezed her hand, looking at her with an intensity that startled Camille. "You did it. You carried it." They left the room in silence, walking side by side down the pastel hallway. Outside, the sun shone brighter, but Camille felt a cold knot in her stomach. Doubt seeped in. What if it failed? What if she disappointed him, herself, or the tiny life inside her? Victor seemed to sense her fear. He reached for her free hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. "No matter what happens, I'm here." Camille managed a small smile. But as Victor led her to the waiting driver, doubt whispered in her mind. Over the next 2 weeks, Camille tried to focus on self-care. She followed Dr. Alvarez's instructions, resting, taking supplements, and walking in the early morning to keep stress at bay. Yet, every twinge in her body felt like a warning sign. She battled sleepless nights, watching the clock until dawn. Victor checked in daily, sending gentle reminders to stay calm. He hired a private nurse to monitor Camille's vitals and even flew in a spiritual healer when medicine did little to calm her mind. Each gesture made her heart swell, but also reminded her of the transactional path they had charted. On the day of the blood test, Camille arrived at the lab alone. Victor had a board meeting in Singapore and couldn't make it back in time. Camille understood, but disappointment stung her. She wrapped her jacket tighter around herself and stepped into the lab. After the quick draw of blood, she walked through the clinic's serene garden, hoping for a sign, anything to tell her the embryo had taken. The roses were in bloom, their scent sweet and hopeful. She breathed deeply, convinced nature supported them. 2 hours later, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Victor. How did it go? Camille's fingers trembled as she typed back, "It's done. Waiting now." Night fell, and Camille could not sleep. At midnight, her phone buzzed again, results. Now. Her heart pounded as she opened the message, positive. Tears spilled over. She sank to her knees in her living room, pressing a hand to her belly as if she could already feel the tiny heartbeat. But joy mingled with fear, fear of the journey ahead. She dialed Victor's number, praying he'd answer. "Victor," she whispered when he picked up. "Camille," he said softly. "Tell me." "It's positive," she sobbed. "I'm pregnant." Silence hung between them. Then, Victor inhaled, a sound Camille could feel. "You're going to be an amazing mother," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And he paused. "I never expected this feeling." Camille smiled through her tears. Neither did I. As they spoke, each aware of the profound step they had taken, the doubt that had shadowed Camille's days melted away. In its place blossomed hope for the child, and for something neither of them could have foreseen. As weeks turned into months, Camille's belly rounded with life, and Victor's world began to shift in unexpected ways. No longer was this a distant transaction. The presence of a child they both longed for bridged the formal distance between them. Camille visited the clinic for her ultrasounds every month, and each appointment drew Victor in more fully. He rescheduled meetings, delegated responsibilities, and always arrived early, determined to see the flicker of their baby's heartbeat. On the day of her fourth ultrasound, Camille found Victor pacing outside the scan room. When the technician welcomed them in, Victor settled into the chair beside Camille, his hand covering hers. The screen on the ultrasound machine glowed as the technician applied gel and moved the probe over Camille's belly. They both leaned forward, breath held. A small form appeared, tiny arms waving in a dance of new life. Tears stung Camille's eyes. A soft smile lit Victor's face like sunrise. "He's perfect," Victor whispered, voice thick with awe. Camille felt her heart swell. "Our son." It was the first time their shared joy melted formalities. They laughed, squeezed each other's hands, and vowed silently to protect this new life. Yet, as joy blossomed, so did external pressures. Victor's social circles began to whisper. His absence from galas sparked speculation. Journalists noted his newfound focus on family. Reporters caught wind of a secret baby project and rumors swirled. Victor, who once controlled every narrative, was now at the mercy of tabloids. One Friday evening, Camille arrived at the penthouse for a prenatal visit. Victor greeted her at the door, concern shadowing his features. "They know," he said, closing the door behind her. Camille's stomach dropped. "Know what?" He led her to the living room, where he had laid out news clippings and social media printouts. Sensational headlines claimed he bought a baby for legacy, and some suggested he used a homeless young woman as a surrogate. Camille's cheeks burned with anger and shame. "I'm not a charity case," she said, voice trembling. "And this child is mine, too." Victor nodded, guilt in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I never thought it would get this far." Camille glanced at her reflection in the window, seeing both fear and determination. "I can't expose you to this," she said. "But I won't hide, either." They sat together, planning how to navigate the storm. Camille insisted on a joint statement, honest, heartfelt, acknowledging their choices and love. Victor, unaccustomed to vulnerability, hesitated. But when Camille's eyes filled with tears, he agreed. A week later, they held a press conference. In a simple blue dress, Camille spoke with quiet strength. "This child is our blessing. We chose each other, not for profit, but for love and life." Victor stood by her side, raw emotion in his gaze. "I underestimated what this meant, to me, to Camille, and to our son. I'm honored to be a father, and proud to be on this journey with her." The world responded with a mix of skepticism and admiration. Some applauded their honesty, others criticized their methods. But amidst the clamor, a deeper truth emerged: love cannot be bought. That night, in the quiet of the penthouse nursery, Victor and Camille prepared the baby's room together. Camille arranged soft toys on the shelf. Victor carefully placed a plush bear beside the crib. They paused to admire their work, hands brushing over pastel walls and delicate mobile. Camille smiled, resting her head on Victor's shoulder. "Look at what we created," she whispered. Victor looked at her, eyes shining. "And look at what you gave me: hope, purpose, and a family." They stood in the nursery, two souls bound by a contract that had transformed into something far greater: love, forged through hope and trial, ready to welcome the life they had fought so hard to protect. In the final trimester, every kick and flutter of life inside Camille felt like a reminder of the journey they shared. September rains pattered against the penthouse windows as Camille reclined on the chaise longue, legs propped with pillows. Victor sat beside her, reading aloud from a parenting guide, his deep baritone voice both soothing and surreal. At 36 weeks, he read, babies respond to familiar voices. Camille traced a finger across her bump. "Try mine," she teased. "See if he responds to me." Victor smiled and placed his hand flat on her belly. "Hello, little one," he whispered. A jab of tiny strength met his palm, and both laughed. "He likes you," Camille said, her eyes bright. Victor watched Camille's joy and felt his heart expand. He remembered signing the contract just months ago, believing he'd gained a child, never imagining the woman carrying that child would capture his heart. As autumn approached, Victor and Camille attended childbirth classes together, practiced breathing exercises, and decorated the nursery with handmade decorations. They argued over color schemes. Victor wanted bold navy, Camille preferred soft pastel green, but laughter always followed. These small disagreements, so unlike the clinical meetings of the past, now felt cherished. One evening, they hosted a small gathering of close friends and family for a baby shower in the rooftop garden. Fairy lights twinkled above, and laughter filled the air. Victor raised a glass. "To Camille, for bringing our son into this world," he said, voice thick with gratitude. Everyone cheered, and Camille blushed, tears pricking her eyes. Later, after guests left, Camille and Victor walked under the moonlight. She slipped her arm through his, resting her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for everything," she murmured. He stopped and turned to her, cupping her face. "Thank you, for trusting me, and for trusting yourself." He kissed her gently. "I never expected to love you this much." Camille's breath caught. "I never expected it either." They held each other in the soft glow of the moon, hearts entwined. But beneath their bliss, uncertainty lingered. Camille's due date approached, and Victor's company faced a hostile takeover bid. Board members demanded his attention, and tabloids speculated about his divided focus. Yet, when it mattered most, Victor remained steadfast. He canceled meetings, postponed travel, and spent evenings massaging Camille's feet, talking to their son. At 38 weeks, Camille went into early labor during a weekend retreat at a countryside estate Victor had rented to escape the city's glare. The hospital was a short drive away, but the journey felt endless. Victor paced the halls outside the delivery suite, memories flooding his mind, first meeting Camille, the contract signed in sterile light, the moment he heard their son's heartbeat echo on a machine. Hours later, after waves of labor, Camille delivered a healthy baby boy early on a misty morning. Victor stood at her side, tears streaming as the doctor placed their son in Camille's arms. The baby's cry cut through the silence, declaring his life. Victor bent forward, brushing tears from his cheeks, and stroked Camille's hair. "You did it," he whispered. Camille, exhausted but radiant, smiled at him. "We did it." Victor gently lifted their son and pressed him against Camille's chest. "He's perfect," he breathed. Camille closed her eyes, feeling the weight of their journey culminate in this moment. She turned to Victor. "Thank you for paying for our baby. But more, thank you for finding me, and finding us." Victor pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I never paid for love." In the quiet of the hospital room, they named their son, Ethan Langford, and closed the circle they began months ago. What started as a business arrangement had become an enduring love story, proving that the most priceless things in life can't be bought, only cherished. And as they left the hospital 3 days later, a family of 3, Victor realized that his greatest fortune wasn't measured in dollars, but in moments like this, love, hope, and the life they created together. 2 weeks after Ethan's birth, the world outside the penthouse began to blur for Victor and Camille. Their days were measured in feedings, diaper changes, and late-night lullabies. The newborn's soft coos and warming weight in their arms filled every corner of their hearts, and left them exhausted yet exhilarated. Victor rearranged his schedule to give Camille the support she needed. He took paternity leave, a term he once looked at skeptically, and found himself cherishing the simpler tasks, rocking Ethan to sleep, preparing Camille's favorite smoothies, and reading baby books he'd once dismissed. He discovered joy in the ordinary, joy that no boardroom victory could match. Camille, recovering her strength, marveled at her son's every milestone. Each day brought something new. The first time Ethan focused on her eyes, the gentle reflex that made his tiny fingers curl around her thumb. She felt a surge of gratitude and love that made the thought of their initial contract feel like a distant memory. Yet, amidst their domestic bliss, new challenges emerged. The tabloids had quieted after the birth announcement, but whispers persisted in Victor's corporate world. A rival CEO hinted that Victor's emotional priorities would weaken his leadership. Board members met in hushed corners, questioning if he could balance a newborn and a multimillion-dollar empire. One morning, Victor arrived at the office to find an urgent demand. A shareholders' summit had been scheduled for the following week to discuss his role. As he looked at the memo, doubt crept in. Could he be both the caring father at home and the decisive leader at work? That evening, Victor shared the news with Camille as he held Ethan against his chest. Camille watched his brow crease in worry. "You need to go," she said softly. "They're just words. You're still you, our son needs you, but he also needs the father who built an empire to keep it strong." Victor kissed her forehead. "I promise, I'll be there." The next day, Victor flew to the summit, Camille's quiet faith bolstering him. In the glass-walled boardroom, surrounded by steel and ambition, Victor began his address. He spoke of responsibility to shareholders, employees, and his newborn son. "I stand before you not only as CEO, but as a father who pleaded for a chance to create life," he said. "I won't apologize for my commitment to this company, nor for my devotion to my family. They are one and the same, both require vision, care, and unwavering dedication." Silence followed. Then, applause. Some board members shifted in their seats, pride replacing doubt. Victor had reminded them that leadership and compassion could coexist. Back home, Victor returned triumphant. Camille met him at the door, Ethan asleep in her arms. Victor knelt, cradling his son and smiling at the tiny face that had changed his life. "I did it," he said quietly. Camille laughed, wrapping her arms around him. "Of course you did. Now let's focus on the next milestone, his first smile." Weeks later, Ethan's first smile lit up the room, capturing both parents' hearts. They celebrated in private, with Victor etching the date in a leather journal and Camille pressing a small lock of his hair between pages. As autumn turned to winter, life settled into a new rhythm. Victor balanced board meetings with bedtime stories. Camille balanced healing with nurturing a young family. Their journey, born from a contract, now pulsed with the unpredictable beauty of love. They understood that challenges would continue, business crises, sleepless nights, and the ever-changing demands of parenthood. Yet, each hurdle only strengthened their partnership. Together, they would face whatever came next, guided by the baby who had brought them together and the love that had blossomed beyond any contract. Winter's first snow painted Legos in ethereal white as Victor carried Ethan through the front door, cheeks rosy and tiny fingers curled around his thumb. Camille greeted them with warm cocoa, the rich fragrance mingling with the scent of pine garlands Victor had draped across the mantel. It was Christmas Eve, a night of firsts and possibilities. They settled by the fireplace. Victor knelt beside the mantel, arranging handcrafted ornaments, each gifted by friends and family. Camille pointed to a small wooden angel he had carved himself. "You made this?" she asked, surprised by his skill. Victor smiled, sheepish. "I wanted our traditions to start now. Something for Ethan to remember." Camille's eyes glistened. "He'll treasure it." They sipped cocoa as Ethan fussed in Camille's arms, gaze wide at the dancing flames. Victor reached out to gently brush a lock of hair from Camille's forehead, remembering their first meeting in that sterile clinic. Now, their home overflowed with warmth. They read a children's storybook, Camille's voice soft, Victor's deep, and then sang carols gently. When they were done, Camille placed Ethan in the crib by the fire, tucking him into a quilt embroidered with his name. Victor hung a stocking for their son, echoing the ones for Camille and himself. Later, Victor surprised Camille with a simple gift, a photo album filled with memories of their journey so far, snapshots of clinic visits, ultrasounds, and candid moments at home. Camille flipped through the pages, tears of joy falling. "You captured everything," she whispered. "Thank you." Victor took her hand. Our story is just beginning. On Christmas morning, they exchanged gifts in the nursery, Ethan cooing as they unwrapped. Victor gave Camille a locket with a tiny photo of their first ultrasound. Camille presented Victor with a handwritten letter recounting the day they signed the contract, and how it led them here. Their first holiday as a family fused their past with their future, reminding them that love was the greatest gift. Yet, even in joy, challenges stirred. Camille's mother arrived unexpectedly, having flown in to share the occasion. The woman who had once worried about Camille's choice now embraced Victor, offering apologies and blessings. Victor, ever graceful, welcomed her as family. Camille watched them, filled with relief and gratitude. Respect between them bridged the gap Camille had feared. Days later, as the holidays wound down, Victor and Camille walked Ethan, now bundled in his first winter suit, through a nearby park. The city lights shimmered on snow-dusted streets. They paused on a bridge overlooking a frozen lagoon, Victor holding Camille as she rested against him. I used to think I had to control everything, Victor admitted softly. But this, right now, it's beautifully unpredictable. Camille traced heart shapes into his coat. That's life and love. They stood together, hearts full, knowing their journey had come far but held still more to reveal. With Ethan's hand in theirs, they would meet every surprise, together. When Ethan turned 6 months old, Victor invited Camille to join him on a business trip to Dubai, an attempt to blend work and family time. He chartered a private jet, transforming the VIP cabin into a cozy nursery with a bassinet, soft blankets, and toys. Camille marveled at his thoughtfulness, but anxiety shadowed her joy. On the flight, Camille fed Ethan while Victor reviewed presentations nearby. The hum of the jet masked his soft murmurs to their son. Camille watched Victor's careful hands and felt her trust deepen. But as they landed in gleaming Dubai under a turquoise sky, she realized that blending their worlds was more complex than she'd imagined. At the conference, Victor unveiled an ambitious sustainable development initiative. Camille stood beside him, holding Ethan, as clients admired not just Victor's vision but the image of a devoted father. Yet, behind closed doors, some board members whispered doubts. This wasn't a family affair, it was a business ploy. One evening, after a successful presentation, Victor arranged a rooftop dinner overlooking the desert skyline. Camille dressed elegantly, Ethan asleep in his portable crib. Victor poured her a glass of champagne. "You did brilliantly today," he said. Everyone was impressed. Camille smiled but hesitated. "Thank you. But sometimes I feel out of place." Victor reached across the table and took her hand. "You're my partner, in life and business now. I know it's a lot to ask, but I want you by my side." Tears pricked Camille's eyes. "I trust you, Victor. I truly do. But I worry this world demands more than I can give." He stood and walked to the edge of the terrace. "I built an empire," he said, voice steady. "But you taught me how to build a family. Neither is complete without the other." Camille approached him, Ethan now awake and cooing. Victor scooped the baby into his arms, and together they watched the horizon blend sky and sand. "It's beautiful," Camille whispered, wrapping her arms around them both. The next day, during a high-stakes negotiation, Victor's competitor unveiled leaked photos of Camille and Ethan on the jet, framing it as a distraction tactic. The room buzzed with speculation. Victor halted the meeting. He stood and addressed the assembly. "Yes, this is my family," he said. "Yes, they travel with me. And yes, they make me stronger. Our success depends on the people we love as much as the deals we close." His words silenced critics. Later, as he and Camille strolled the marina, hand in hand with Ethan, Camille realized her trust in Victor had grown from cautious hope to unwavering faith. She smiled at him. "Thank you for believing in us." Victor kissed her temple. "Thank you for trusting in me." Under the desert stars, their bond felt unbreakable, tested by boardrooms and binary choices, but forged in love and trust. Ethan's first laugh echoed through the penthouse living room, a bright sound that filled every corner with joy. Camille had been playing peekaboo, And when Ethan's eyes lit up and he giggled, Victor rushed in from his office, dropping his briefcase to join the celebration. "Did you hear that?" Camille asked, tears of happiness in her eyes. Victor knelt beside them, lifting Ethan into his arms. "Our boy's got a sense of humor already." He pressed a kiss to Ethan's forehead. Just like his mother. They spent the afternoon teaching Ethan new games and reading picture books, savoring these simple milestones. The world outside, the boardrooms, the tabloids, faded away, leaving only their small circle of love. That evening, Victor set up a small photo shoot to capture Ethan's first laugh. He recruited a photographer friend and arranged soft lighting in the nursery. Camille dressed Ethan in a tiny white jumper, his cherubic face ready for the camera. As the camera clicked, Victor and Camille exchanged proud smiles, knowing they were preserving memories they'd treasure forever. Yet even in these blissful moments, life moved forward. Camille returned to work part-time, writing articles about motherhood and her journey with Victor. Her perspective resonated, readers found hope in her honesty. Meanwhile, Victor launched a company-wide parental support program, inspired by his own experiences. Soon, images of him cradling Ethan appeared in industry magazines, not as scandal but as an example of empathetic leadership. One afternoon, Camille received an invitation to speak at a women's conference about her surrogacy experience. She hesitated, sharing such personal details felt daunting. Victor encouraged her. "Your story can help others," he said. "The world needs to hear it." On the day of the conference, Camille stood on a brightly lit stage, Ethan asleep in the arms of a trusted nanny. She spoke with vulnerability, about signing a contract with a wealthy stranger, about doubt, hope, and the unexpected love that grew. She ended with a message: family can form in ways we never expect. And love finds a way. The audience rose in applause, moved by her courage. Camille stepped off the stage, and Victor greeted her with open arms. "You were incredible," he said. She smiled, leaning into him. "We did it together." As Ethan grew into a curious toddler, each new milestone, first steps, first words, became a family celebration. Victor reconstructed his schedule around playdates and bedtime stories, while Camille balanced working on her memoir. They faced challenges, sleepless nights, toddler tantrums, and corporate crises, but each hurdle reminded them of their partnership. On Ethan's first birthday, they hosted a small party in the rooftop garden. Balloons drifted among fairy lights, and friends and family gathered to celebrate. Victor lifted Ethan high as the crowd sang "Happy Birthday." Camille captured the moment, her camera clicking as their son's face lit with delight. That night, after guests departed, the three walked under the stars. Ethan clung to their hands, his small fingers entwined with theirs. Camille whispered, "Look how far we've come." Victor kissed her cheek. From a contract to this, a family built on love. They watched Ethan wave at a passing firefly, marveling at life's beautiful unfolding. And in that luminous moment, they understood, their greatest chapter was not the one they'd planned, but the one they lived every day. Spring returned to Lagos, painting the world in vibrant greens and blossoms, a fitting backdrop for the final chapter of their journey. Ethan, now nearly 2, toddled through the penthouse playroom, his laughter echoing against sunlit walls. Victor watched from the doorway, Camille at his side, both parents smiling as their son chased a bright red ball. "Look at him," Camille whispered, leaning against Victor. "He's so full of life." Victor wrapped an arm around her. "And because of you, he knows what it means to be loved." They moved to the window, overlooking the city that had once felt both distant and demanding. Now, Lagos symbolized their growth, a place where contracts had given way to connections, where business had blended seamlessly with family. Later that day, they hosted a small gathering on the rooftop garden, inviting only those closest to them. As friends and family filled the space with warmth and celebration, Victor stepped forward for a brief speech. "Thank you all for being with us," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "When Camille and I began this journey, none of us could have predicted its twists and turns. We started with a contract, but we've discovered something infinitely more precious: love, trust, and a true partnership." He glanced at Camille, who beamed back. The guests raised their glasses. To family, they toasted, voices mingling in joyful harmony. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Victor took Camille's hand and led her to the edge of the terrace. Ethan, tired from the day's excitement, rested in a nanny's arms nearby. "I never planned to fall in love," Victor said softly. Camille squeezed his hand. "I never planned it either, but I wouldn't change a thing." He pulled a small box from his pocket and knelt on one knee, surprising Camille. Guests gasped and smiles spread. "Camille Bishop," he said, voice filled with love, "you have given me a family I never knew I needed. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Camille's eyes as she covered her mouth. "Yes," she whispered, then laughed through her tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Victor stood and slipped a ring onto her finger, an elegant band with a single diamond reflecting the setting sun. Their guests erupted in cheers, and Victor lifted Camille into his arms, spinning her around. Ethan, intrigued, reached out and giggled, prompting applause. Later, as the stars emerged overhead, Victor, Camille, and Ethan sat together, a perfect picture of their blended worlds. "We've come full circle," Camille said, resting her head on Victor's shoulder. Victor kissed her temple. "And our story is just beginning." They watched Ethan chase fireflies near the glass railing, a symbol of fleeting magic and enduring wonder. In that moment, they knew that while their journey began with a business arrangement, it would continue with love as their guiding contract, one written in hearts, not on paper, lasting far beyond any chapter or number of words. Hey there, story lovers. If you want to add a little more magic, adventure, and heartwarming moments to your day, make sure you subscribe to the Daily Stories channel on YouTube. Join our community of dreamers and seekers of inspiration. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our new story every single day.